welcome to another Thursday Roundup with the 905er podcast. My name is Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And we've got a packed lineup, people, and it actually is pretty packed. We actually have more stories than we can fit in today. So we're going to start off with a piece of good news, I think. Although, well, we'll talk about all sides of it. But definitely a piece of good news at the root of it all, and that is the Halton Catholic District School Board decision last week on the pride flag issue. Joel, you live tweeted it, which was extremely courageous.
All 5 hours of it.
Yeah, my goodness. I joined in for the last hour or so, and that was more than enough.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was a typical HCDSB board meeting, very dry affair, but a lot of emotions. This was the big one. If listeners remember, we had on Trustee Brenda Agnew 2 weeks ago to discuss her bringing back the issue of raising the pride flag at board offices and board schools for this coming Pride Month and future Pride Months forevermore. I'd like to say that it was a clean-cut affair and that the trustees had seen the light and they saw the error of their ways, and it was, all was right in the world. But it was, I just hope we don't have to do another one of these where I have to live tweet, because that was a long, arduous process. I do know that the trustees were watching our live tweets, because I got a few comments from Trustee Ian Tomasi live as I was tweeting them for some corrections, which was nice to have, and it was nice to know that we were being viewed by the powers that be. But in the end,
probably just as well that he wasn't watching my Twitter feed, because it was a lot. it was less neutrally toned than yours was.
Well, I was trying to be professional, but at the end, past 12:30 in the morning, the board finally passed the motion that this June, this Pride Month, the Pride flag will be flying at all of its schools and buildings forever, which is it's a good thing. It's about time. Painfully way to get here, but we did get here nonetheless.
Yeah, and I think, congratulations to the trustees who. Well, first of all, congratulations to Trustee Agnew, and I'm blanking on the name.
Nancy Guzzo, who is another ally and proponent of this initiative.
Yeah, so congratulations to them, but also congratulations to the trustees who were those trustees who had reservations because of their faith, whatever, and who made the right decision and who behaved like reasonable human beings as part of the process of coming to a decision. I do ultimately respect people's decisions that are informed by people's faith. What I do not respect at all were the two trustees, one of whom is Vince Tomasi and the other one is Tim O'Brien, who are really an utter disgrace. And in their behavior was, I don't know what it's informed by, but it doesn't seem to be any kind of logical or honest interpretation of faith that I can see. It's about delaying, obstructing in the most outrageous fashion. In the last minutes of this debate, suddenly Tim O'Brien brings in the Indigenous flag of Canada, which is one of the flags you'll see around, not necessarily one that Canada's Indigenous people are interested in.
Here's the thing. It's not, there's no official Canadian Indigenous flag. It's a flag by an Indigenous artist who I believe the flag that was proposed, if you look it up, all the proceeds go to that artist. It is a private piece of art. It's not an official political flag. It's not an official statement. If anything, and this is for future reference, if you're going to fly an Indigenous flag at the schools, fly the flag of the Mississaugas of the Credit.
Yeah.
The people's land that you acknowledge every morning and that you did at the start of the meeting. You might want to pay attention to that. That was
it was completely cynical,
egregious, hypocritical statement, and it showed just how much bad faith argument was happening here. Because I was sitting there, no, if you're going to say, well, we should honor the Indigenous peoples of this country, then honor the people that you're acknowledging at the start of every board meeting and at the end of every start of every school day, and that is the people of the Mississauga of the Credits. I think that's a little hypocritical. I want to just jump in and say, I think the real people who deserve a lot of credit and who really stood out in this at that meeting and as really having their stuff together were the HCDSB student trustees, Kitty Bowie, Gabriel Masri Amar, and Alicia Tokiwa, as well as student alumni Nicole Hotchkiss, who I just want to point out that I did address them with improper pronouns when I was live tweeting. I do want to apologize for that. That was an oversight on my part. But those individuals did a bang up job of just bringing the facts, the statistics, the quotes, and the passion that was badly needed in this debate. I was really impressed by their professionalism. Thank God they had somebody at that table had some, but their professionalism, their composure, and their just their passion. Those are 4 individuals who I think will have a very profound future ahead of them. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear their names in various situations for the better. These are people who are going to make not just the 905, but I would imagine the province and, dare I say it, the country better in the long term. So kudos to the 4 of them.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree with that. They did really well. They were the bigger people. They were the people who were acting like the adults in the room, were acting with grace and reasonableness, and being a lot more articulate than I am right this second. So well done for them. Well done for them. And thank goodness we can put this behind us now. I'm afraid to say, I don't think this will be the last time that the things going on at that board are subjects of discussions on this podcast, because it is that board is deeply problematic, and we have an election this year, and I hope that the people who form that board from next year are there for the right reasons. I mean, and I'm not saying that there are just too many people there right now who are not there for the right reasons. There are, I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush, but it's got to change for the better. It really has to. So I hope we can help shine a light on what's happening in that board. That's definitely something that I think we're providing a service to the community on.
Absolutely. Why don't we take a break from that, and we'll go to a sponsor break, and then we'll be right back. All right. We're back. Just before we dive into our next story, I do want to give a small shout out to an individual on social media, Peyton Rose Mitchell, who by dumb blind luck, I happened to be scrolling through TikTok, and I found a TikTok that she made of her favorite political podcasts that she listens to keep herself informed and educated on the issues that are important to her. And she had quite the stellar list. Canadaland, Nora Loretto were on there. And lo and behold, who was included in this stellar list but yours truly? The 905 was added to it. We were very humbled that we would be included in such esteemed regard. So just a quick shout out to Peyton for listening to us, and thanks very much, Peyton. But what we do have is another story on surprise, surprise development. But this time it's not just another gripe. We might actually have a solution, or maybe. I don't know, Roland, you tell us.
Yeah, so the provincial government, who we're deeply in love with the provincial government, as everybody knows. Everything they do is wonderful. However, by accident or design, they set up a task force on affordable housing, which, this provincial government doesn't do a whole lot of consultation. So even the fact that they were trying to do some kind of consultation is, maybe a positive sign. And last week, the draft report or recommendations of this task force were leaked to a journalist at TVO. And so TVO sort of gave a summary of what's in those recommendations. It's John Michael McGrath of TVO who published them. So I went through and had a look and sort of gave my initial, my very much initial reaction to what it was saying. When there isn't a whole lot of detail here in this kind of in these leaked details. I think the actual recommendations are meant to be published at the end of the month, so we don't have too long to wait for the official document. But there's plenty in these recommendations to talk about. The frontline, the headline recommendation in this is that basically all single-family home areas, all those areas in every city, which tend to make up the bulk of the kind of land, built-up land at least, of single-family homes, currently are kind of untouchable. The only thing you can build in a single-family home neighborhood is a single-family home. That they should be opened up to, as of right, buildings of up to 4 stories. And what this would allow is what's called this gentle density approach, where in amongst single-family homes, you could have a duplex, a triplex, a 4-story building, apartment building, as used to exist in the past. That's exactly what right now I live in a 3-story building in amongst single-family homes. This was normal in the 1880s to the 1920s and beyond. So kind of going back to that model. Now, I said on Twitter that I thought it was a pretty radical recommendation, and kind of got called out by a whole bunch of people who are in favor of this motion, saying, "Oh, it's not that radical, really. It's only 4 stories, and they do it in Europe." It's like, yeah, I know all of this. What's radical about it is it doesn't happen here, and it hasn't happened for decades. And that when you say to people who live in single-family home neighborhoods, who, with the double garages, who feel completely safe, that I say safe in inverted commas here, who know that their neighborhood is not going to change because, you can build downtown, you can build on greenfields, but you cannot build next door to a single family home. That's Doug Ford's core constituency, and it's Stephen Del Duca's core constituency, and to be honest, it's Andrea Horwath's core constituency too. If you frighten those people with the thought that, oh my God, we're going to have renters moving in, and maybe that, unfortunately, it can appeal to the worst instincts of people who tend to be very anti-change as default anyway. So, yeah, it's like, I do think this is radical. I also think there's a lot to recommend it. I think in reality, it would not, what wouldn't happen is you suddenly go from single family home streets to streets that are dominated by apartment buildings. It would be more a matter of very gradual evolution, because you can't build something unless someone sells it.
I mean, let's give credit where credit's due. This is, if the Conservatives do pass this or put something like this forward, I give a lot of credit to Doug Ford and to Minister Steve Clark to really put forward a really positive change that I think is it'll touch on a lot of the things that they want to do. It will help deal with affordability, because you'll be able to put a lot more livable units on the marketplace, which will help. Which is, again, something that, hey, you know what? Maybe they have been listening to the podcast, because we had Mike Moffat on twice in the past, and basically the issue is we don't have enough places for people to live. The market, the demand doesn't meet the supply. The supply doesn't meet the demand. This might be a way to help solve that. You're right. I think it's about getting people out of the mindset of, well, I need to buy a single family home, and there's an empty field there. Well, I got to put a home there. No, we got to start thinking about infill, especially. And again, this goes into the sprawl ham-on people. What they were talking about was all these places downtown that are vacant, derelict, basically useless, redesign them into duplex, triplex, 4-story livable units will go a long way to just adding stuff to the market and start stopping the bleed of housing that's happening in this province.
Well, I feel like, this was the point that I couldn't get through when I was running as a candidate, because, in Burlington, all the heat was on downtown development, and people who would call themselves like urbanists and environmentalists and so on, who I count myself amongst, would say, well, you're pandering to the NIMBYs here, and it's like, no. What I'm kind of saying is, it doesn't have to be sprawl or high rise. Mm-hmm. In fact, those are two extremes of the development styles. And what we've had for far too long in Ontario is, we pick small areas in each city and say, this is where high rises can go. And when we pick areas on the edge of town, this is where the single family homes can go. And all that other stuff is off limits pretty much. And
that seems crazy to me. Now, when I was canvassing, street for street through Burlington, you would see all these 60s, 4-story buildings built up until the 1960s in amongst single-family homes, small rental units, affordable housing. It's like, this is affordable housing. This is good quality housing in amongst wealth, people with homes of their own who are obviously wealthier or whatever. Why do we stop building that in the 60s? Why is it that 70s, 80s, 90s onwards, that this just doesn't happen anymore? And that's what we're really talking about getting back to with this. And I do think it's a much more healthy, it has potential to be much more healthy. Now, do I think this government is going to pass that recommendation? Because this recommendation is not coming from politicians. It's coming from this task force of people they appointed. Now, I've made recommendations on it wasn't called a task force, but it was a similar kind of thing. And I know how far, what kind of lead balloon they went down looking like. It's possible that this has been leaked because, the government's going to look at that recommendation of, hey, let's do something that threatens the soccer moms and soccer dads.
Well, what I'm concerned about is, as you pointed out in your analysis, which we'll have a link to Roland's article in our show notes. But you make a good point in your analysis that it opens up to smaller development companies.
Yeah.
Not the Green Parks and the Mattamy Homes and the National Homes, like these big gargantuan companies that really are. I mean, when we talk about development, those are the people and those are the companies that really stand out to a lot of us. They're the ones who they're pushing for the Greenbelt to be chopped up so that they can get in there. What I find interesting is that it opens up to the smaller companies. And what excites me about that is because, again, it's that free market principle. If you're having these smaller companies opening up to more innovative housing, not only are they going to build duplex, triplex, 4-story affordable housing, hopefully, they got to find a way to make you want to move in there, which means better amenities for life, better quality, greener build materials that go in there. I'm hoping longer lasting materials, things that you say, yeah, I'm going to live on a 3rd-story triplex, so be it, with my family. But man, oh man, like my energy bill is going to be very manageable. Or I have, I have. My house is wired for internet and smart technology and whatnot. Like, this is the stuff that the smaller companies can innovate because they're sitting there, they're hungry, right? They want to become the Mattamys and the National Homes. And the only way to do that is you got to outthink, outplay, old fashioned capitalism is what's at play here. So, and then on top of that, it's not just the brick buildings. Like, we also have to talk about livable things, more public space, more public Wi-Fi, meaning that there has to be maybe more storefronts and whatnot to accommodate shops, grocers, restaurants, all these things that would not make a neighborhood lovable and living and lovely to live in. That's what's exciting to me, is that you're really opening up to some competition, some real innovation happening in the home market. At least I'm hoping. I might. History might prove me wrong, but
I think the details that we've got so far are so vague and so limited that you worry about the law of unintended consequences. So, doing this without also changing the laws around parking minimums, say,
right,
so that you build a triplex, but now you've got to have so much land given over to parking, so now you're clogging up the streets with wasted parking lots. Good intentions can go awry. I mean, I think that's really the lesson of the Places to Grow Act. It's an act with very good intentions that has caused a bunch of problems because of unintended consequences that haven't been addressed.
I'd like to know. My worry is that this plan of action has an opportunity to really cut into, let's face it, Doug Ford's bread and butter. That is the development industry. We know that they are closely tied. We know that they go to the same barbecues, the same Ford Fests, and the same backyard hoot nannies. I can imagine a lot of them saying, "No, we're not jonesing for the fact that there might be some upstart company in there who's looking at this saying, yeah, I can build some fantastic homes, affordable homes for people to live in and make a name for myself in the business." I imagine that there are a lot of people saying, "Oh, we like things the way they are. They benefit us." What I hope is going to happen is Ms. Horvath or Mr. Del Duca are going to look at this and saying, "This might be it. This might be my way of standing apart from the conservatives and a way to actually address the problems at the core of what's happening in this province." Will they have the courage to do it? Time will tell. You know what? Let's invite them on. Let's have Mr. Del Duca and Ms. Horvath on separately, of course. And this is a question I'd ask them. This is exactly a question I would ask them. Are they going to endorse this, and will they make this a part of their campaign platform?
Absolutely. I thought there were other things in the list, in the recommendations, in the leaked recommendations. So, all kinds of caveats attached here that I was not so much of a fan of. One of which was making cities pay compensation for heritage houses that get listed, which basically would mean that the city can't actually afford to list heritage houses anymore. Which I just thought was stupid and pointless. We have Ontario is one of the worst jurisdictions in the world in terms of protection for any kind of heritage. We really just suck at it. It's something when you look at the States and see them doing a far better job of preserving interesting historical neighborhoods. But that's a smaller issue than the big one. The big one is really this single family homes thing, and I can niggle about the other stuff, and I certainly would do. But it's good that this is even on the table to be discussed. To be honest,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily expect it to be on the table to be discussed. So I hope it is in the recommendations that make it out to the public at the end of the month. I hope it doesn't get kind of spiked by the province. Wouldn't surprise me if it did. And, there's an awful long way to go from a recommendations of a task force to legislation, especially in an election year. So time will tell. But yeah, the best hope may be that the opposition parties jump on something like this and take it on as a cause that they want to be champions of.
Well, let's go on to our last story for the episode, which is a doozy and probably going to get your blood boiling if you're if you have what do they call them? Oh yeah, soul.
Soul, yeah.
So
people with the soul, turn off now. No, don't do that.
So the city of Hamilton is basically turning off the warm air for homeless people. Is basically the cold zones version of this one. Yeah, so at City Hall there are hot air vents that are used by the homeless people of the city to get warm. Especially in case you haven't noticed, it is freezing outside, folks. It is January. Winter is here. It is -20 on a warm day. So yeah, the homeless in Hamilton, when they want to get warm and survive, there are events outside of Hamilton City Hall that they used to congregate on and get warm on. Not anymore. The City Hall has sealed them up. They've turned off the hot air, literally, forcing the homeless to migrate elsewhere to survive the cold weather. I have thoughts on this. Roland, what are yours?
Yeah, my thoughts are it's stupid, pointless, counterproductive, heartless. Particularly, at any time of year. This has a long tradition, this kind of behaviour by cities. We were just talking about it before we came on air. About why do park benches have 3 arms on them so people can't sleep on them? Why do people literally put spikes into sidewalks to stop people sleeping by doorways? But this for the city itself, the city hall itself, to do this, particularly given everything else that's been happening in recent weeks, given the fact that it is between -10, -20, whatever, plus wind chill outside right now, and really, what is the reason for moving people on? Where else are they going to go? If they're not sleeping on your doorstep, they're going to sleep on someone else's. So thanks, you're not solving the problem, you're moving it, and you're moving it to a more dangerous place, a less well-lit place, a colder place, where someone might die of hypothermia.
Not only that, but let's face it, this city hates homeless people. I think we can safely say that at this point, after the tent evictions that went horribly wrong for the city and for the city police. This is just this is kind of the footnote to that chapter in my mind. I kind of get where the city's coming from on this. I get, nobody wants to see homeless people sleeping on the streets. Nobody does. For whatever your reasoning is, I think we can all safely say we don't want to see it. The problem is the attitude towards it. Either you look at them as they're scum and they're a nuisance and we need to eradicate them, like literally eradicate them, push them aside no matter what, or you look at them as human beings and say we need to house these people, not corral them into a mission or a shelter to get them out of the way. Legitimately house them. That point's a really hard one to do. I mean, that takes money and initiative and an actual plan, and you actually have to do something to do this. Clearly, the city of Hamilton does not want to do that. They rather take, it's just the stuff like it's just cruel in my mind. It's cruel to say no. We're not gonna allow you to be here. Okay, where do you want me to go? I don't care. Just not here.
Yeah, and which is, when you say, we don't want to look at that, well, why don't we want to look at that? Well, I was saying the primary reason people living comfortably in houses, or why City Hall doesn't want to look at that, which is, a problematic phrase all on its own, it's because it tells us that we failed, that all our promises of building better cities and better societies and more equitable societies have failed, and we have not managed to get people off the streets. And here it is still, in the middle of winter with people huddling by an air vent. If you want the homeless people to go away, you have to provide them with solutions, with places to live, and to choose this moment. And I presume this has been going on for years. This isn't a new, Hamilton City Hall has been around a while. But they choose to do this in January. And as Joey Coleman pointed out, they probably technically need, a minor variance or something, or to put up the damn hoarding. And of course, they won't have done that because they're the city and they don't need to worry about it. So, and frankly, a couple of big boards sticking up with metal frames on the outside of City Hall, which will no doubt be covered with vandalism or something in a few weeks. That's pretty damn ugly too. I'd rather have the homeless people sleeping there and actually at least know that they're safe. It's just so incredibly thoughtless of like, there's a problem. How can we solve it? Well, just by getting rid of it so that we can't see it anymore. So we just brush it under the carpet. And it just, this is the way things have always been done. They're not the first city to do this. They won't be the last. But it's in the context of, the kind of, literal sort of coming to blows, police kneeling on people's necks as they're clearing tents off the fields. It's like, why don't you just leave the people with the damn tents in the fields? At least they'll be safe in a tent, probably, or safer. I mean, the ridiculousness of like, if you are homeless in Hamilton, like, well, whatever I do, I'm screwed. What the hell am I supposed to do here?
What it just strikes me as it'd be one thing to say, okay, no, don't sleep on the grate. Go to a socialized housing, or let's get you into, if you need mental health services, here you go. We'll put you into that pipeline. But these things don't exist. And I think that's the cruelty of it. It's, why don't you pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Well, these people don't literally in some cases don't even have boots. Why don't, get your act together, go get a job? Well, how do you get a job when you don't have a place to live? And that's
people who are homeless will tend to have. I'm trying not to generalize here, but there will be all kinds of exceptionalities, health problems, whatever. That there are all kinds of things which complicate the picture. So yeah, many homeless people are complicated to deal with for a variety of reasons that are no fault of their own necessarily. That's not an excuse for just abandoning them and saying, well, what can you do? So we'll just keep on kicking them off doorstep after doorstep until we run out of doorsteps and they move to someone else's city. It's just not good enough in this day and age to keep on year after year coming out with the lies that we're trying to actually solve these problems when we're not. We're just trying to stick band-aids over solutions and constantly, why didn't they want homeless people
living in tents in the park. Again, it's purely visual. This is just keeping up with the Joneses. We don't, you're giving Hamilton a bad reputation. Well, of course they are, because Hamilton sucks for this stuff. You deserve a bad reputation.
Every city sucks for this stuff. And that's the thing, is that that's the problem with the real problem of homelessness, is that it reminds the city, we failed. You're right. We failed at this. We failed objectively and just completely on this front. And that's why you're in the naysayers, the people who are listening to this, and they're going to, I know right now we're going to hear, oh, well, they deserve it. They put themselves in that position. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't get, they didn't get their life in order. They're a bunch of bums, and they're, whatever the excuse is. Here's the thing. We know for a fact, and ask anyone in those camps, homelessness doesn't it just happens to you. It's usually for reasons not of your making, and especially in this day and age with the pandemic and the uncertainty of employment in some cases, it just happens. And to find yourself suddenly thrown out on the street, it's just a sign that we don't care about these people, which is, again, why let's literally push them off to the side. Because if we push them off to the side, I don't have to deal with it. We don't actually have to come up with a policy or plan to fix it. And here's the thing. We know for a fact the easiest problem for it is just build them a house to live in. Like, they say, oh, we can't afford it. We can't afford to build this. Yeah, we can. We've said it before. Heck, coming off our previous discussion, you start infilling all these sites downtown Hamilton, and you say, you know what, for every 10% of your new development, that has to be given over to a public housing corporation, the Hamilton Housing Corporation, or whatever the case may be. And you just give it to the home. Like, there's none of this, oh, you got to get a job first. You got to get this. Just say, no, we put you in there. We'll put you in there, and then we'll throw services at your way. We'll get you a job, get you cleaned up, and start working. And you know what? They do it around the world. They do it in Europe. They do it in the Scandinavian countries. And you know what? It works. It works on turning people's lives around, and it's helping solve the issue. It can work here. And the fact that we don't do it, I think is just cruel.
Yeah, we've got to get beyond this notion that we have as a society that somehow we don't have money to do anything. When, I don't know, I look at the kind of money my parents had when I was a child, and the lifestyle. They didn't have a car. They didn't have central heating. For about the first 5 years of my life, they didn't have a fridge for some reason. I think that was laziness, actually, not that they just don't think they got around to buying one. But the things that we think are absolutely a requirement, they would have considered themselves kind of middle-class people. Like, my dad was an accountant. I mean, very much lower middle class if we qualified at all. But he was a professional, I guess. But all these things we didn't have that we now consider absolutely essentials of modern life. And yet somehow they didn't feel that they can afford, to fully fund the health service or to pay for all kinds of things that we don't pay for anymore. It's a huge lie that we don't have the money to solve the problems if we have the desire to solve them. Yeah, it's just purely a lack of will when it comes to things like poverty and homelessness.
I want to think, if there's one thing that this pandemic has shown us, is that we need to stop worrying about taking care of the job creators or the businesses. They'll figure it out on their own. Where the money needs to go in the future, it has to be towards people, helping make life more affordable for people, helping things like subsidized daycare for families, subsidized housing, affordable housing, free housing if that's the case, to get people off the street, better work hours, better working conditions, better employment rights. These are the things that are going to make a difference in what we need going forward. There's just, we can do better. I know we can. And that's the thing. The 905 region has a lot of wealth in it. It has a lot of people. And I do think it has a lot of compassion and a lot of people whose hearts are in the right place. And I think what we need is leadership to stop listening to vested interests, stop listening to money, start talking to people, and realize you have a lot of power and you have a lot of goodwill out there. And we've seen we've seen a lot of money can be put in. It might be needed to put into this, but to me, it's a small term pain for a long term gain. And I think we can do it. I really do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think we need to rebuild our faith in society as a whole, working together to do amazing things. Working hand in hand with government as our servant, doing things on our behalf to attain the objectives that we have as society. Like, hey, defeat poverty. People talk about things like ending poverty, decade after decade after decade. It's so damn achievable. There aren't that many homeless people, compared with so many of the other things that we do. It's very much within reach to end homelessness and to eliminate poverty. These are not the biggest things that we need to be doing. We can do these ones. And yet there's been such a massive collapse of kind of trust and faith in government as something that as something that can do things to make conditions for everybody better and more equitable and more fair. It's such a feeling that this is as good as it's get. Really, we're just in a kind of backwards fight to stop it getting worse. We need to turn that on its head. We really do. But this, the reasons why we're held up, well, I suspect we'll come onto those in weeks ahead. I'm just thinking of that convoy and what that symbolizes. Let's not get onto that one.
But I think that's something you and I have talked, when we took that break over the holidays, you and I were talking about what did we want to do this year's an election year for both provincial and municipalities in Ontario. And if something we wanted to do with this podcast was, and you might not believe it from this episode, but talking about the problems of the day and just bitching and complaining about it, we kind of want to get away from that. We want to start looking at what are the solutions. And we're hoping over the weeks and months ahead that we'll start providing not the answers, but just maybe start a conversation with you and other people, just to start thinking outside the box of, hey, you know what? Maybe this stuff is possible. We can actually tackle that. And you know what? I would hope that you start throwing it back to Mr. Del Duca, Ms. Horvath, and Mr. Ford, and you start holding them to account and say, why don't we have these things? I suspect a lot of times it's going to. I expect a lot of times it's going to come back to just a lack of will. Is ultimately what it comes down to.
Yeah, the lack of will for that kind of courageous, risk-taking policy announcements. But yeah, listeners, please write into us and tell us what do you want to see on the platforms this year, the provincial platforms. What do you want to see that you're pretty sure isn't going to be there, and why? And if you had one of the party leaders available to talk to, what would you ask them? What would you be saying is the most important thing they should be looking for right now? Because we chunter away here each week. We're just we're no more experts than you are, and we really do appreciate and value and want your suggestions, recommendations, and ideas. And let's try and start influencing these people.
On that note, we'll call it a day. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.